Good morning, everybody. This is Laura with the Odessa Library here for story time, and you might see a screen share right now, and that's because we're going to start off story time with an ebook, and I would love to show everybody how to find ebooks through the library's website. So we'll start that off with story time. And the theme for story time today is empathy. And the reason that we're choosing empathy today is that in the past couple of weeks, you might have been seeing some sad and upsetting news on the news. And today we're going to be thinking about how we can care for and remember others. And the people we will be remembering today are those from Ukraine. So the theme will be about Ukraine, a story called The Mitten, which is a Ukrainian folktale. We have some poetry by a Ukrainian poet. And last, a story that explores the feeling of being a refugee, and that's called Bright Star. So to kick things off, we will start with the mitten, and I'll show you all how to find the mitten as an ebook. So here I went to a website called Starcat, and you can find that through the STLS website. It's a way to find books online. So here at the top we have a search bar, and I'm going to write in the mitten. So here you can see a list of books called The Mitten. The one we want is by Jan Brett. And you can see here, this is a physical book, this first one. But the second one is an ebook, which you can borrow right at home or anywhere from your device. And if you say over here, place hold, if we click that, well, first of all, you have to be logged in, which I did already. The login button is here at the top. So once you're logged in, you can place the hold. And if you click place hold, you'll see the book in your account. So I'm going to pop over here to the book, which is really exciting to be able to borrow a book and read it right online. So we'll get started here with Jan Brett's The Mitten. The Mitten, a Ukrainian folktale adapted and illustrated by Jan Brett. Once there was a boy named Nicky who wanted his new mittens made from wool as white as snow. At first, his grandmother, Baba, did not want to knit white mittens. If you drop one in the snow, she warned, you'll never find it. But Nicky wanted snow white mittens, and finally Baba made them. After she finished, she said, "When you come home, first I will look to see if you are safe and sound, but then I will look to see if you still have your snow white mittens." So off Nicky went, and it wasn't long until one of his new mittens dropped in the snow and was left behind. A mole, tired from tunneling along, discovered the mitten and burrowed inside. It was cozy and warm and just the right size, so he decided to stay. A snowshoe rabbit came hopping by. He stopped for a moment to admire his winter coat. It was then that he saw the mitten, and he wiggled in, feet first. The mole didn't think there was room for both of them, but when he saw the rabbit's big kickers, he moved over. Next, the hedgehog came snuffing along. Having spent the day looking under wet leaves for things to eat, he decided to move into the mitten and warm himself. The mole and the rabbit were bumped and jostled, but not being ones to argue with someone covered with prickles, they made room. As soon as the hedgehog disappeared into the mitten, a big owl, attracted by the commotion, swooped down. When he decided to move in also, the mole, the rabbit, and the hedgehog grumbled. But when they saw the owl's glinty talons, they quickly let him in. Those do look sharp. Up through the snow appeared a badger. He eyed the mitten and began to climb in. The mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, and the owl were not pleased. There's no room left, but when they saw his diggers, they gave him the thumb. It started snowing, but the animals were snug in the mitten. A waft of warm steam rose in the air, and a fox trotting by stopped to investigate. Just the sight of the cozy mitten made him feel drowsy. The fox poked his muzzle in. When the mole, the rabbit, the hedgehog, the owl, and the badger saw his shiny teeth, they gave the fox lots of room. Wow, look how it's expanding, that mitten. A great bear lumbered by. He spied the mitten all plumped up. Not being one to be left out of the cold, he began to nose his way in. The animals were packed in as tightly as could be. But what animal would argue with a bear? The mitten swelled and stretched. It was pulled and bulged to many times its size, but Baba's good knitting held fast. Along came a meadow mouse, no bigger than an acorn. She wriggled into one space left and made herself comfortable on top of the great bear's nose. The bear, tickled by the mouse's whiskers, gave an enormous sneeze. Ah! 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 Got you! The force of the sneeze shot the mitten up into the sky and scattered the animals in all directions. On his way home, Nicky saw a white shape in the distance. It was his lost mitten, silhouetted against the blue sky. As he ran to catch his snow-white mitten, he saw Baba's face in the window. First she looked to see if he was safe and sound, and then she saw that he still had his new mittens. And that is the end. If you're just joining us, we are doing story time right now with the theme of empathy, particularly for people from Ukraine. So the first story we just read was The Mitten. And next we are going to read some poetry by a Ukrainian poet. The Ukrainian poet's name is Lyuba Yakimchuk, and this is a photo of her along with her book of poetry called Apricots of Donbass. So this poet is also a screenwriter and journalist. She is the author of several full-length poetry collections, including the title Like Fashion and Apricots of Donbass, and the film script for The Building of the Word. She was born and raised in a small coal mining town in Ukraine's industrial east, and she lost her family home when she and her parents and sisters were forced to flee as refugees. Before her home in eastern Ukraine was a war zone, poet Lyuba Yakimchuk experienced it as a kind of paradise. She said, "In the spring, I could see the wild apricots in bloom." To make a living, people in her town would pick apricots and sell them to conductors on the train between Moscow and Kiev. So with that, we'll read one of her poems called Asylum, a Dance. The apricot tree's arms are broken. Her dancing wild, the golden sequins rustle, like thousands of children armed with bells. Her head turns with the wind. All the ducks emigrated, and even the hen departed in a truck to a far-away land, far and away, confirmed an Arctic turn, which only landed here for a quick transfer. Yet my apricot tree isn't packing its leaves into suitcases, even though she does have somewhere to go. Relatives send her postcards on dandelion fluff, offered to help out with a visa. She stands all alone by a slag heap, and when the wind comes, she does her wild dance, as if she's ready to uproot herself to fly away to a better life. Asylum, a dance, desperate and risky, as long as an apricot tree root, as long as the apricot tree's very life. Again, that was Asylum, a Dance by Lyuba Yakimchuk. And I just love the way she uses metaphors, trees, and birds to tell her story of wanting to keep rooted at her home. So our last book for today, before our craft on empathy, how we can relate to others, how stories are just so powerful in understanding loss and grief. This one is called Bright Star by Yuyi Morales. And this explores the way that people from Mexico have felt. So, let us begin. Bright Star by Yuyi Morales. Child, you are awake. Breathe in, then breathe out. Hermosa criatura. So as you'll notice, this book is in English and in Spanish. You are alive. You are a bright star inside our hearts. Mira! Some things you can see, others you must find. images are incredible. So colorful. So you search. You are ready, cosita pequeña. Let's go. Vámonos. Oh no! What is that? Look and listen. Be alert. Corazoncito tembloroso. Breathe in, despacito, then gently breathe out. Lie low. We want you safe. Here it says, Te amo. No matter where you are a bright star inside our hearts. And if you feel afraid and you begin to hurt inside, let it out. Shout it loud. Let the world know what you feel. Say no. The earth murmurs your story. We are here to protect you. You are not alone. Listen. Sometimes silence tells you secrets. And you imagine a new story. You imagine the most beautiful world. You are a bright star. inside our hearts. That is the end of the story for this book, but I wanted to show you that the author has some explanation for the book at the end, and I won't read all of them, but if you check this book out, I would really recommend reading these. So the first one, I made this book because you and I are connected. And even though that might be hard to see, it is real. Real like the roots of trees and plants under the earth, sending each other signals and nourishment so that they can thrive together. I love this idea of sharing nourishment, which I think is at the core of empathy. How even if we're great distances apart from each other, we can still feel what each other is going through. I made this book, says the author, because I have many questions. When we are wronged, how do we heal? How do we care for one another when we are apart? How do we love those we don't even know? I made this book to show you an amazing place on our planet called the Borderlands, harsh and beautiful, where Mexico and the United States meet. I made this book knowing that children everywhere, but especially migrant children at the Borderlands, have experienced things that they should never have to endure. I made this book because I want you to know that no matter where you are, where you've come from, or where you are going, you should always be honored, respected, cared for, and loved. So this book again is by Yuyi Morales, and it will be at the Odessa Library. So that is the end of our stories to share about empathy, but we have a craft project today inspired by the first story that we read, The Mitten, which was a knitted mitten. So today our project will be some very basic knitting. And for this, you would need some knitting needles. It can be any size. They have lots of different sizes, and some are made of wood like these, and others are metal. But a pair of knitting needles and some yarn. I have some gray yarn, not like the mitten, which was white, but I would like everyone to be able to see the knitting. So the first step in knitting is to do what's called a cast on. So for that, we'll have our yarn, and we'll make a loop like this, a loop, and then with the end here, the shorter end, we'll make another loop like this and pull through. And this loop, which can move now, is going to slip onto one needle like that, and pull it tight, and we will cast on a series of stitches. I'll just do about 10, but for your project you might want more or less. So to do that, we'll wrap the yarn around our finger and slide it through the needle. How do we usually do this? Okay, so continue on with, use your right hand to hold the yarn and the left hand for the needle, and slide it on one by one, wrapping, twist, and slide it through. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And next we will start our knitting. So let's see if it helps to lower this. Okay. So to knit, we'll hold the needle with the stitches in our left hand and our spare needle in our right hand. The first step is to put this needle into the first stitch. So I'm pushing it through, then hold it there with your left hand and wrap the yarn around the right needle. Again, I'm going around, and pull down. And then lift the stitch off the needle like this. And you've made one knit stitch. And we'll just do that over and over so you can see it again. I'm sliding the right needle in, going around, and then down and off, like that. Around and off. It takes some practice for sure. I learned this from my mom, and she taught me very, very well, but it took me lots and lots of practice to get the stitches down. My very first scarf was full of holes and extra stitches, and it looked very wonky, but over time you get the hang of it. And the last stitch is just the same. And you'll end up with an empty needle and a full needle, like that. And you'll notice the stitches are a little hard to see on the first one, but they are all along here, a row of knitting. And I'll do one more row to show how you do the next one, which is just the same. Put the needle in, wrap around, down and off, like that. One thing that's really nice about knitting and other crafts with yarn is that in times where we're facing difficulty or anxiety, maybe from watching the news and feeling empathy, working with yarn and fiber is very, very soothing. It can feel really nice in your hands, keeping your hands busy, creating something very soft. It feels really nice and can be helpful. And our last one, like that. So now you can see our knitting is getting wider here. and we could keep going and going until we have a piece that's very long or very short, or however long you want to make your knitting. So there are lots of patterns online for knitting, and yeah, I hope that you enjoy this process if you want to try it out. And yes, that is the conclusion for today's story time. Thank you all so much for sharing your time here and sharing these stories, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.